Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And yeah, this video is a technique I've shown before. I called it Easy Glitzy Embossed Backgrounds, and I will link to that previous video at the end of this one. And I wanted to play with it again. And the fun thing about it is I do ink blending in the beginning, and it is a hot mess. Literally, trust me, it is a hot mess. I don't actually blend. I pretty much just slap ink down. But then the magic of it is to use this Paper Glitz sparkle paste from Picket Studios that I've shown in so many videos. I actually just used it. Was it my last video? I think it was my last video, and I use it to like thin out my glitter paste, things like that. Anyway, really fun, really easy, a little mucky, messy, but worth it. And it made the kind of trippiest background with the embossing folder I used, which was this Circle Hoops embossing folder. And yeah, keep watching, and I will show you guys how I made these cards. So I really wasn't kidding when I said I slap ink onto these panels. I chose 3 very vibrant inks. These are Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks, and I used Ocean, TAFFY, and Galaxy, of course, and a blending brush, and slapped color on. I am not trying to get a blend, which is difficult in the sense of you just now you want to blend it, but I was curious. I was like, So I know, because I did that other video, I covered it with the paper glitz, etc. And I was like, I don't think you're going to be able to tell, if I spend a ton of time making it all perfect, blend it together. I was like, how messy can I make this and see what happens? So I was at this point, I wasn't 100% sure this was going to work. So I just slapped color on. And if you guys have watched like older videos, it's been a while since I've done Galaxy backgrounds, but like I've done them with watercolor, different things, and they always look like a hot mess. And I have so many people who doubt me, and I'm always like, just wait till I'm done. It's kind of the same thing with this. Wait till it's done, because this is hideous. So I did those 3, and then for black, I just used black soot distress ink and just slapped it on with a blending brush. Like, I've got streaks, little bristle marks, etc., because I am not worried about blending this. It's just part of it is these will blend a little bit with the paper glitz. It'll kind of do its thing, and then between that and the embossing folder, like, you literally cannot tell. You just can't tell. You can't tell. So don't bother wasting a ton of time. Just stick some color down. And I purposely went with super, super vibrant colors because they're going to tone back a fair bit. Although in real life, the colors are a little more vibrant. It was unbelievably difficult filming this as well as trying to get pictures because just the shine and, all the things. Anyway, paper glitz. Again, showed this in the previous video. I used it in the other video I did with the embossing folders, etc. in the exact same way. And it's very, very thin, like liquidy consistency, which is perfect for this technique. But I also use it because it's so thin, like I've shown in previous videos, I use this to thin out some of my glitter pastes that are nearing the end of their life. So I mixed it up really well, and then I applied it with my spatula first, and then I used my little stencil pal. You gotta kind of figure out what works. You need to use light pressure. I purposely will use heavier pressure here just to show, because I had people commenting, they're like, I have streaks in mine. You're pressing too hard. There is glitter in this, like mica is in this. So if you're pressing really hard, you're literally scraping the mica across your background. See, like that, right there. That's what I'm talking about. And it will leave a streaky mess. It still doesn't need to be perfect, especially because it's going to get embossed. But even I'm going to just muck with this just because I felt like it, So I'm going to go back and forth. And I was just like, let's just see what happens. So I went back and forth with my little spatula as well, just to see if I could do it with just this. Either way kind of works because it's a little streaky, but again, it's going to dry. It's going to be fabulous. It's not going to matter. So you can see right now, it's a little bit streaky. That's okay. I'm going to gently peel this off my work surface because, you know, I'm getting it everywhere. And then I just set it aside on hardboard to dry. I'm going to quickly wipe off what's on my glass mat here, just so I'm not getting it absolutely everywhere and fusing the cardstock to the glass because that can happen. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the second panel and apply a decent amount. And then I'm going to use my stencil pal to just kind of somewhat evenly drag it across. And I am holding the stencil pal when I drag it across almost horizontal, really. And again, very, very light pressure. You know, you're kind of just floating the product across. And this time I used very thin cardstock. This is pretty much the equivalent. I've linked to like Neenah 80 pound. It's just random cardstock for my stash, honestly. And I don't have a link for it. So it's very similar to Neenah 80 pound though. And the last time I did this technique, I think I used Simon's 120 pound, which holds up even better, obviously, because it's thicker. And yeah, but you don't want to add too much. It just takes a bit, you know? So I let it dry. It depends again on like climate, all the different things for how long it takes to dry. Mine, I honestly went and did 5 million other things. So I think it sat for a couple hours till it was dry. Then I have my Platinum 6 machine. I have the original platform base and 2 metal shims. And look at that. Look at it. Just as is, it looks pretty fabulous. In real life, if you looked close, I think you could still see a little bit of the streakiness of the ink blending. So if you're not planning on running it through with an embossing folder, I would be a little more... I would put in a little more effort ink blending is what I'm trying to say. You know, make things a little smoother. Still doesn't need to be perfect. But yeah, but the embossing takes it up to a whole other level. So I ran this through with that embossing folder. And I used the base of the original Platinum 6 platform. And I have 2 metal shims. That's what works for me for Simon's 3D embossing folders. And seriously, like how trippy is this? I was looking at it and I was like, ooh, if you have like, because there have been a couple brands that have come with that little like vinyl record wafer dies and like music notes. I was like, oh, this background would be perfect for that too. Like do like a music theme, you know, and add the like vinyl record wafer die cuts and, you know, an appropriate sentiment and just how fun. So yeah, I went with like Galaxy theme because that's where my head was at. So ran the second panel through with the same embossing folder and just got it centered, made sure everything was lined up in the folder. And then once it's all lined up, I will run it through my die cut machine. And yeah, on Simon's website with all of their embossing folders, they do list different sandwich recommendations for different machines, etc. You sometimes need to experiment a little bit with what works best for you. My biggest piece of advice is do not force it. If if the machine's not taking it, don't force it. You'll break your machine. So embossed the second one and then sat here and played with it for a bit, just tilting it back and forth because it just between the pattern and the shine and the inks and everything, it was trippy. It was fun. So to add to that, I pulled out some of Simon's holographic cardstock and I'm using that to die cut the You're Out of This World sentiment. So I'm going to do this twice. So I'm going to run that through and die cut it. And then off camera, I also die cut it from scraps of dull pink cardstock, which I'll be using to stack behind it for dimension. You could skip this step, but I decided to be a little fiddly and stack them. And I went with the pink cardstock because you can see, you know, when you tilt the card, you can see the pink and it just kind of ties it in with the backgrounds. So to adhere them, I'm using craft tacky glue that I have in one of my little Gina K precision bottles. And I just trace along the sentiment and then, again, do a little bit of fiddliness to get things lined up. Not too difficult, really. So I've got 2 layers of the dull pink cardstock die cuts, and I'm going to top that with the holographic, which again, very difficult to like film and photograph because it keeps reflecting all the colors and all the light. So once I've got those adhered together, my outline I die cut from Simon's vellum. And same thing, I just flip over the die cut words and trace the back with the craft tacky glue. Then I'm going to pop that into place. And then the only extra piece in this wafer die set is the dot for the eye, which I kept all of them in a little triangle tray. You can always skip this step, use a little gemstone if you want, a little or like one of the little star die cuts, because I'll get to those in a minute. That would have worked too, but I kept them and I stacked them in place. I still shake my head at myself. Way back in the day, I used to like stack those like on their own before adhering them to like, it was ridiculous, the amount of like time and frustration. So yeah, I just stack them into place with dabs of glue, pick up the little dots with my embellishment wand, press them into the glue, stack them, done, and move on to the next thing. So I did all of that. And then the stars I mentioned. This is the mini stars party die set. I've used this in a bunch of videos. There's a heart one as well. And they're great just for adding little accents to everything. So I pulled out some different colors of Simon's glitter cardstock. And a couple of people mentioned the last time I used Simon's glitter cardstock, they were like, I didn't know they had this. Oh, they got tons of different colors of glitter cardstock. And I love this stuff. It die cuts wonderfully, doesn't shed. So if you do not like glitter, like you love glitter, but you don't like working with glitter, this stuff's great because yeah, you can die cut it and you're not going to have glitter everywhere. So I die cut the 3 different colors with that, set those aside because those will be my embellishments. And then I ended up using just a couple sentiments from the You Are My Universe stamp set. This is one of the new ones that Simon came out with. I was originally going to use like some of the planets and like stamp them and everything, but I ended up deciding, I was like, I don't want to cover up any of the background. So it's like, I'll save the planets for a different project and I'm just going to use a couple of the sentiments. So I stamped the little thank you sentiment onto some black, just a scrap of black cardstock. I used my anti-static powder tool. I stamped the sentiments with clear embossing ink, covered them with detail weight embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool, removed the excess anti-static powder tool with my microfiber cloth, and then I die cut those sentiments with one of Simon's sentiment label wafer dies, set those aside. And then on the inside of the card, I used another sentiment from that set, and I'm just going to stamp that with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And these cards are going to be top folding A2 note cards, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I stamped those sentiments onto the insides of the cards. And then for those backgrounds that I had embossed, I'm going to use my trimmer to trim these down. And I'm being very careful. This is sped up in editing, but I'm being very careful as I trim these because thinner cardstock and all the things, plus just specifically to type patterns like this. I've had this happen with other embossing folders too. Sometimes you'll notice like the cardstock splits here and there, which is fine because once everything's adhered, it's not going to matter. But you just got to pay attention to it that you don't end up like ripping off a portion of the pattern when you're trimming things or adhering them down. But I was just careful when I trimmed it. And then I put Big Mama foam tape right up against the very edges especially, and then, down the centers and whatnot on these so that I get a bit of dimension. Plus it's just going to adhere everything really well. And then I'm going to pop these onto my card bases. So I've got my backgrounds on my card bases. I originally was going to adhere the sentiments by doing what I always do, like just trace behind the words so that you don't see the adhesive. And then I changed my mind. And I'm going to completely cover the back of this with craft tacky glue. You could use your finger for this. I was just in a mood when I did this and I didn't want to do it. I didn't want my fingers in the glue. So I used a palette knife. Anything works. I don't mind craft tacky glue because it doesn't dry sticky. It's sticky adhesives that I can't, they just drive me nuts. But yeah, I just use my palette knife. And by doing this, it makes the vellum a little less transparent. And this is actually what I was going for because in the end, and I'm not sure if it really shows up in pictures or on video, you can see the pattern through the vellum because like the glue really sticks to all those little circular raised areas. And you can see some of the color through as well, which just kind of adds to it. Because normally I don't like adding, especially liquid adhesive, I don't like adding a lot of it to the back of vellum. It can make vellum curl. It's just a pain to deal with. But this is one of the few exceptions where it was kind of worth it. Plus, it was less work really than just tracing directly behind those words. And Yeah, so I did it again, this time over some scrap paper, so I'm not getting glue all over my work surface. So just scribbled some glue and then spread it out nicely with my palette knife so that the whole back of this is completely covered. And then I press it into the card front, and I make sure to kind of continually press it down because, like I said, vellum wants to curl. It's just the nature of the product. It's so thin and just the way it reacts to stuff like that. So it wants to kind of curl up, and I want all of the vellum to be just pressed down and stay adhered. So I just keep pressing it and holding it with my fingers until it starts to dry, and then it's good to go. And then my little stars that I die cut, I just put them into my little triangle trays, and then I just pick them up with the embellishment wand, put down a dab of glue, adhere them into place. So I just sprinkled a bunch of them, you know, around the sentiment here on the card fronts. And I've got extras left over, which was perfect because I wanted to put these onto the insides of these cards as well, because it really ties in with the sentiment I put on the inside, which says, "May the stars shine bright for you." So I sprinkled also just kind of randomly a bunch of these little stars all over the insides of the cards. Just dab of glue, pressed in a star, dab of glue, pressed in a star. So put those all over the place. And then I had completely forgotten I had those little heat embossed sentiments. So remembered those at the last minute. So I just took little bits of my waffle flower foam strips, stuck those on the back of each of these little sentiments, and then I'm going to adhere those onto the front of the cards right below the "You're Out of This World" sentiment. And once I get those popped into place, these cards are then complete. So I do turn on my flashlight to kind of show it's not so much sparkly on these backgrounds. They're just pure shimmer, really, you know, like just pure solid shimmer with this trippy pattern and the colors, and it was fun. These were fun to make. So like I mentioned earlier, I will link to that other video at the end, in the end screen of this one. And then, like I always do, below the video, I'll have a link to my blog post that'll have pictures of the cards, picture links to everything. Below the video will also have my supply list with links to all the supplies I use. So you can check that out below if you are interested. As always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.